Hi everyone, it's Marvin Bloom. How are you? I'm doing fine. I arrived the other day from Sweden, so I'm exhausted. My sleep patterns are off like crazy. I'm up when everyone's sleeping. It's great, but it's all right. I don't feel sick or anything. I had a wonderful time in Sweden. Thank you everyone in Sweden for helping me. Got home safe and sound, thank God. I did have that long layover in Amsterdam, but it was not a problem. In fact, I don't think anything bad happens at the airport. Their toilets, they call them toilets. They don't call them bathrooms. They're not like the ones in America, because they've got these very private stalls you go in where the walls go all the way down to the floor. So there's no way you can do like, what Larry Craig did, the senator guy, and tap your feet under, like, some gay people do as part of the gay lifestyle. So, so I was safe, at there. So that was good because I really had to go to the bathroom. But, Sweden is very different from America. They're not alike in a lot of ways, and like little things that surprised me, like they don't have Dunkin' Donuts. I'm like, wait, you don't have everyone has Dunkin' Donuts now, And like, one morning I wanted to go out and get a box of donuts, and they were like, you can't. I was like, what do you mean you can't go out for donuts? I'm like, what do you have, like, meatball stores or something? What do you got, So anyway, so that's just no bagels either. You couldn't get a bagel in the whole town. But the other thing that was very strange was the sauna, okay? All right, well, a bunch of Alex's friends said, oh, come on over. We're going to have a little get-together for a little fika, they call it. Yeah, fika, right. What it meant was we sat around, and then we went into the sauna. And I'm feeling very uncomfortable because people are taking off all their clothes, okay, which I've got a problem with, And, these men were very, Swedish. And I was like, I don't know, Lord, help me. So I go, sit down in the sauna, and it's kind of tightly packed, in there. And I'm sitting with these men, and all of a sudden, the door opens, and 3 women come in, completely stark naked. I was like, oh my God. I thought I was in the middle of some, orgy, and I thought, Lord, and I'm all the way stuck in the back. I couldn't walk out without, rubbing up against everyone, and I wasn't about to do that. So I'm just sitting there, closing my eyes, pleading the blood of Jesus, and they're talking in Swedish, and after a while, I'm thinking they're talking about me. And I didn't want it to be all about me, but I'm like, they're talking about me, I could tell. And I look up, and they're not only talking about me, but I can see them, looking at me down there. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, they're checking me out, which is, part of me was flattered, because, God's blessed me in, so many ways. But I'm thinking, this is highly inappropriate. So I turn to Alex, who's sitting next to me, and I say, Alex, are they talking about me, down there? And he says, oh, yeah, they're talking about your cock. I said, excuse me, young man, that is completely inappropriate language. But, he didn't mean to say it that way. He just didn't know the right word. So I had to explain to him about, penis, and that's the correct word you should use. But, sparingly, don't, whatever. And turns out they were so fascinated by my, penis because it's circumcised. And that most of them had actually never seen a live circumcised penis before. I'm like, what, you don't let Jewish people into the sauna or something? But, I guess, I don't know, whatever. They didn't, and so they were fascinated by it. And so when they knew I knew what they were talking about, they asked me all kinds of questions, that I couldn't answer, like, did it hurt? I'm like, I don't know. I was like 8 days old. What do I know? And, why do you do it? Does it feel different? I'm like, how do I know? I don't know what it feels like. It was very highly uncomfortable. But, whatever. I just thought, it was an opportunity to witness about Jesus. So I did, in between, questions, I said, well, how God's blessed me and stuff. So it was very strange, and that there is one ongoing problem I have from the whole sauna experience is that I keep getting flashbacks about some of the men, which gets me uncomfortable inside and outside and stuff. So what I've been doing then is when that happens and I think of these men, not consciously, but, the images, unbidden, come up in my mind, I then think about the women, and their bodies, and that calms me down. So, yeah. So anyway, I need to get to sleep, even though it's the middle of the day. But all right, you guys have a wonderful day.